What is Mitch McConnell thinking? The impeachment circus came to a very satisfactory conclusion. Trump was acquitted, actually acquitted for the second time. He's now 2-0 with these characters. 7 Republicans defected. I think 2 of them were a bit of a surprise. Richard Burr in North Carolina, and also Cassidy from Louisiana. Now, the funny thing is that almost immediately upon these Republican senators voting for impeachment, there were these movements to censure them by the GOP in their own states. And this is happening not just with Burr, not just with Cassidy, but there's a petition to censure Romney. Toomey's been censured, I believe, in Pennsylvania. So all these guys are facing, I think, deserved backlash. Ben Sasse in Nebraska and so on. So you would think that Mitch McConnell at this point would be worrying about, you know what, this is bad for the GOP. There's a rift that is clearly opening up between this Republican establishment, as symbolized by these 7 senators, and the rest of the party. Certainly the Republican base is overwhelmingly behind Trump. But somewhat mysteriously, Mitch McConnell jumps in and bashes Trump. He bashes Trump after voting to acquit. Now, he does this on the basis of a sort of Jesuitical. By the way, I like that word, Jesuitical. It's a product of the Reformation. Reformation propaganda. The Jesuits would make all these distinctions, and the Reformation theologians who couldn't quite handle them went, these are Jesuitical, as if to say they're unimportant, they're technical, they're foolish. In any event, McConnell basically says, look, I think that this was unconstitutional, so I'm voting to acquit. But interestingly, McConnell thinks that Trump is on the merits guilty. In McConnell's own words, he is practically and morally responsible. Listen.
Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. And having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth.
So, what McConnell is getting at here is that Trump did it. Trump incited the insurrection, and moreover, that Trump is responsible for what McConnell calls dereliction of duty after it occurred. And McConnell, this is for McConnell, very colorful language. These criminals were carrying his banners, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him. But even this kind of decorative language, if you think about it, shows no insurrection. They were carrying his banners. Does that sound like an insurrection? They were hanging his flags. They were screaming their loyalty. That's it? McConnell probably lives in a somewhat rarefied world, but for those of us who go to college campuses, for example, have you ever seen an occupation of a dean's office You have these students, they're screaming, they're hanging all kinds of posters all over the place, they're submitting their non-negotiable demands, they're kicking over the waste paper basket, they're pushing and shoving, and there's the typical non-resistance from, you have to admit, campus policemen. You've got these rotund campus policemen grinning all over the place, doing nothing to stop the students. We've seen this picture over and over again. This is not called insurrection, this is called essentially a sophomoric tantrum, and that's what happened in Washington. This was a crowd that was rowdy, got a little bit out of hand, but it didn't do what Antifa's been doing or Black Lives Matter has been doing for months. And remember, this is really the scandal. Antifa's been knocking over statues. Did these guys pull down all the statues in the Capitol? No. Antifa's been burning churches. Did these guys set the Capitol on fire? No. Antifa's been burning other buildings, attacking cops, shooting people, killing them. Murders, gunfire. Antifa's been establishing occupied zones, which have existed for weeks, if not months. Did these guys occupy the Capitol and basically stage a coup and take over the place for weeks or months? No. They were there for minutes. So there is a kind of a surrealism to McConnell's complaint. It actually makes no sense. So what really is going on here? What is McConnell actually trying to accomplish? Now, McConnell, I recognize, is a creature of habit. He says things like, well, I've been around here for 38 years. We've, seen things come and go. We've seen the peaceful transition of power. But if McConnell should know anything, he should know that this is actually not a normal time. This has not been a normal year. This was not a normal election. The Democrats have been condoning a bending of the rules, a changing of the system, a sanction of violence on the streets that's never happened before. So when nothing is normal about a situation, to demand normalcy reveals a certain kind of blindness, a kind of foolishness, if you will. I think what really is getting McConnell is that he's blaming Trump for the Georgia election. And we have to admit that the Georgia election was a bitter disappointment. Georgia is not a purple state, it's a red state. So how did we lose Georgia? Well, I think the answer to that is not that difficult to figure out. We lost Georgia for the simple reason that a lot of the Trumpsters stayed home. And they stayed home not because Trump told them to stay home. In fact, Trump told them, get out and vote. They didn't stay home because they listened to Trump. They stayed home because they didn't listen to Trump. They believed on their own, with their own eyes, that something was very wrong, not only with Georgia, but wrong with the Republican Party that raised a whole bunch of money to fight election fraud and did absolutely nothing to do that. So the Georgia Republicans decided, we're going to teach these Republicans a lesson. This is a fight not between the traditional establishment and Trump. It's a fight between the traditional GOP establishment and its own voters who feel that the GOP establishment has betrayed them. That's the problem you need to fix, Mitch McConnell.